Hello, my name is Les Hins, Vice President of TPC International. The intent of this video is to give basic operator training to new drivers operating our TIREBOSS tire pressure control system. We're going to touch on operational and safety aspects of the system. We manufacture and distribute TIREBOSS systems from our facility here in Edmonton. The first component I'd like to mention is the operator control. It's mounted inside the cab of the truck in various locations dependent on the cab style and model of truck. This is the valve control module. It's the place where the inflate and deflate takes place on the tires, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But first we'll move back to the drive wheels and the external hardwares. We've got a number of things. We've got a spring-loaded hanger in the center here, so it's got some flexibility should something grab the hose. Typically a lot of questions about the hoses and the durability. As precarious as they may look, they've been a very practical and very user-friendly method of hardware. And we've got a number of things here. As you see, the wheel end valves are actually in a closed position right now. There's one at each tire, so each individual tire actually has a wheel end valve on it. We recommend that these valves are shut off for parking if the truck is parked for an extended period of time. And before the driver starts up in the morning, we recommend that he comes and he actually opens these valves. If there happened to be a low tire or a leaky tire, you would hear the air transfer into that tire when you open the valves. So you would do this on all 8 tires on the other side of the truck as well. And again, if there's a leak, you would hear the air transfer. For wheel servicing, if you were to be changing an outside tire, for example, you would shut the wheel valves. Once you've closed the wheel valves, you would then remove this swivel fitting on the end of the hose right here. So it'll swivel off and the hose stays with the tire. The valve stems on the tires do not have the depressors in them. They're removed for clear airflow, so it's dependent on this valve being shut to retain the air in the tire. You would then have to take this compression fitting off right here and just move it out of the way, and then the wheel actually will come out over top of all this hardware. You don't have to remove any of the manifold and such. The question of tire chains comes up often. What the drivers do when they're applying chains is simply take these fittings, these 45 degrees, and they flare them out a little bit further to give the hose a little bit more clearance around the tire. So if you flare that one out and this one out, the hose will come out around here. And it's not an issue at all to apply the chains. You just take them, you throw them over top of the tires and around the hose. A lot of people have questioned taking these hoses off when chaining. It's not required to do that. One more note on the tire chains. When the chains are applied to the wheels, you have to run at the highest pressure setting. You don't want to take a chance of the sidewalls of the tires where the chains are coming in there making contact with each other. So the rule is if you put chains on, keep your tire pressures up. You can put the chains on when they're at a lower pressure and then reinflate, but don't run at low pressures with the chains on. Another thing to consider, if you're going into excessively deep mud, and we know these trucks do that, where they'll come up axle height into some ruts and mud, and in particular with chains on, if you're going to get into a real tough situation, not a bad idea to shut the wheel valves off. Set your tire pressures, that's open, but you want to close the valves like these are, and it's isolated from each other where basically if anything happened to any hardware, you're not going to lose any air from the tires, especially if you're in a situation where you can't stop because you're in such a bad hole. If the vehicle is equipped on the steer axle, there will be a shutoff valve at the frame rail. There'll be one of these for each wheel. So this is again in the on position. That's closed as it should be for parking, and then reopened for normal operation. On the outside of the wheel here, we have a protective disc that we utilize in very rough service conditions to protect some of the hardware inside the wheel well itself. If the system is controlling the trailers, it has a supply line like this with a quick coupler supplying the air to and from the trailer tires back to the control box on the truck or the tractor. Back to the valve control on the side of the frame here. There are a number of things to take note of. On the side here, this line is actually the pressure port that goes to the tires. So this is tire pressure here, providing the wheel valves are open, of course. This Schrader valve is a central point if you were to want to fill the tires from this port. let's say you lost battery power for some reason and your tire pressure was low, you could actually take the Schrader off of here and with an external air supply actually fill the tires from this port. Another thing I'd like to mention, there's a strainer in here to catch any rubber fragments or debris that might come back from a tire. And what it does is it just catches large particles before they get into the exhaust valve, because the air actually comes back to this point and exhausts out the bottom of the box here. Recommended service on this is to do it with the oil changes, let's say every 300 hours, to go ahead and just pull the screen out of here, blow it clean, and put it back in. Taking note that the wheel valves have to be closed off because it's pressurized. So you'd actually close the wheel valves, drain the air out of the Schrader valve here, and then go ahead and pull the plug off of the strainer. The control valve is actually in cold climates like we're operating here in Canada. We have a thermostat on this valve measuring the temperature of the body, and it'll turn a heater on when it gets near the freezing point and regulate the temperature of the valve. We recommend on an annual basis actually to go in and put a kit into this valve. It's like servicing an air dryer. It's a good preventive maintenance. Takes a couple hours to do max. Simple operation to ensure your system keeps working fine. Another normal practice would be to drain your wet tanks regularly, and on a daily basis go ahead and pull the truck cable drain as I am here and monitor that there's no moisture in there. If moisture starts to develop, that's an indication that your air dryers need to be serviced. The dryers in any event should be serviced in the late part of the summer going into the fall, rather than waiting until the winter when it might be too late if you had moisture in your system. So in this part of Canada, to do it in the month of September would be a reasonable time to service your air dryers. On the back of the controller there's actually a toggle switch to turn it off and on. The intent is that this switch is always in the on position. The control will come off and on with the ignition of the truck. So once the ignition's turned on, our toll-free number comes up so you can easily get a hold of us. And two warnings come up. The first one is the operator control must be on at all times while the vehicle is in motion or when it's moving. And the second warning is to ensure all the wheel valves are open at the wheels before operating the vehicle. Very important, both those messages, both those alerts. It tells us what application we're on, in this case a heavy load application. I'll explain more about that later. And the actual setting it's on right now is primary empty. The drives are going to 70 psi. And there's no overspeed monitored because we're in an empty condition on the highway with adequate tire pressure. It then goes into operation as you see here, and the drives are actually okay at the set point of 70 psi. And that status will stay there until you want to change the pressure setting. In order to change pressures, you simply scroll up or down on these arrows on the left side of the controller. If you press any one of these arrows once, it simply tells you what setting you're on, and then reconfirms if there's an overspeed limit associated with that. In this case there isn't on the primary empty. As you scroll up or down through these arrows, it will actually show you the different settings that are in there, and you can just stop on whichever one you decide to utilize. So in this case, if I go up right to, let's say for example, a field loaded setting where the drives will change to 35 psi with a 14 km/h speed limit, and you can probably hear the deflate taking place, what's going to happen is the tires are going to deflate right down to the 35 psi set point that was programmed in there, which is a proper, appropriate pressure setting for that low speed in the field spraying applications in this case, below 14 km/h. Deflates are of course indicated by DEF on the controller, and it'll continue to deflate down. It happens fairly quickly. You do not need to wait for the pressure to change before you move the truck. You do all this while the vehicle is in motion, so it's not holding up the production of the truck in any way. The same holds true when you're into an inflate situation while the vehicle is moving. You can select the inflate and let it do its thing as you continue to operate the truck. We're almost there. We're down to 36, now 35 psi. The exhaust valve has closed. It quit deflating. You'll see some stabilization of pressure, and for it to rise on its own like this is not unusual. What it does is it's stabilizing in pressure between the actual tire pressure and the point at where we're sensing the air pressure. So during the deflate there's a bit of a differential on this, and it'll cycle or kick in a number of times before it actually stabilizes. The upper tolerance is 5 psi above the set point. As you see, when it gets to 40, it'll kick in another deflate. And if the pressure were to drop 2 psi below the set point, it would then reinflate it back to the set point. In order to throw it into an inflate, we can scroll back to another setting, and in this case, let's go to a empty setting, secondary empty, let's say 45 psi. 85 kilometers an hour is the speed limit here in this case, and it's thrown itself into an inflate, and the tire pressure will now start to inflate up to that set point. I'd like to talk a little bit about the overspeed function on the system. In this case, the secondary empty setting at 45 pounds has an overspeed limit of 85 kilometers an hour. And if the driver or the truck manages to hit that overspeed limit, it'll come up in the controller with a warning telling him he's going too fast for the setting. This warning appears on the screen. This is it here. It says overspeed condition, maximum speed 85 kilometers an hour, telling him to slow down or change the setting. That warning will come up at preset intervals to warn the driver with a beep each time, as you see here. And if he continues to operate the vehicle continuously in an overspeed condition for 30 seconds, it will then come up and tell him that the control system is changing the setting, and it's done it there. It's changed to the primary empty setting, and it will automatically start to inflate the tires. Another function built into the controller is the dimming function for nighttime operation. If you press the dim function here, it reduces the glare of the text here for a nighttime operation, and it illuminates all the white text on the control box so you can see it and operate it at night. In the operator control guide, we reference a sequence for changing between applications, which is changing between the various pages of pressures that are available. And this is in the control guide, so you can, or the operator guide, so you can look at it after you're in operation with the truck. But you go into the menu and you hit enter because you want to be able to change the application. It happens to be on heavy load 2 there. If you don't select or enter another selection, it just goes back into operation. So I'll come back into menu, I'll hit enter, and I'll say I want to change that to application 1, which is a different set of pressures, and I'll hold this until it beeped there, and it's now loaded into or operating on a different set of pressures, which are listed in the back of your control guide. Then it sits there and it wants you to accept the setting that it's on. It wants you to reconfirm that that setting is actually what you want, and when you hit enter in there, it will accept it and go into operation. So now we're actually operating on that other setting, and if I go down to the setting we were at before, sorry, I'll go this way, to the field loaded, you see it's now at 30 psi where it used to be at 35. So we're running on a different set of pressures. Same type of speed limit. In this case, it just happened to be a bit of a lighter load, and it'll deflate now to that new set point of 30 psi, which is on that particular application.